Hello, everybody. I'm Clutch, and it's time to get real with a very special guest, the general manager from the Houston Rockets, Mr. Daryl Morey.
Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you here. And first off, we had some questions that were submitted by our fans on Facebook. Ethan Bright asks, what brings you to MLG Raleigh, and what advice would you give to esports on what it needs to become bigger?
Well, I'm a big fan. I think it's going to be a huge sport. I'm excited to walk around and be at, the early days of, I think a sport that's going to be, one of the biggest in the world. And I actually think it might be the biggest sport in the world over time. So pretty excited. I think, just from, if you study the history of leagues, really what you need is time. The quicker you can get to a good central organizing structure. And then obviously over time, people root for teams, and having that grow is really how you build a fan base.
My next question comes from Twitter. Jake9790 asks, the Houston Rockets are my favorite basketball team. What's your favorite esports team?
I'm pretty partial to the Evil Geniuses. I got to know Alex, and Idra is a pretty amazing player, so pretty big fan.
He is, and having that league structure here in the United States, really get to see a lot of homegrown talent.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's good to see, obviously we got some international talent here, and the mix of that, I think, is bringing interest to the sport, just like, when the U.S. basketball team goes and plays over in London, and
yeah.
I think obviously the Korean teams are pretty amazing.
Yeah, they are. Well, these next questions are going to come from me directly. The first one is a pretty heavy hitter, according to the community. Do you consider professional gamers like MVP, DRG, Idra, Grubby, MC, Flash, Jadong athletes?
Well, I think it comes down to the definition of athlete. To me, really, this is definitely a sporting event. I was talking to Greg, and he said he's doing 15 events a day. I mean, that takes enormous mental and physical capacity to pull that off. So I don't think that's a question. I think, definitely athletes, definitely a sport that I think should be recognized like any other.
True. I mean, even looking at the history of Taekwondo back in the 90s when it first got added to the Olympics, people kind of didn't consider martial arts to be a sport. But once it was internationally recognized in such a huge capacity as the Olympics, people are like, yep, it's a sport now. So I'll have to agree.
We'll have it in the Olympics in a few years.
Yeah, 2020 maybe.
20-something.
Yeah, definitely.
When Korea gets the Olympics or something.
They'll definitely feature it. My next question is, traditional sports have always been male-dominated in both players and fans. In esports, the majority are male players and fans, but there's also this generation gap. Do we need to have esports on television to increase the interest for people over 30, or would that be a step backwards?
Well, I think I will say I hold the MIT Analytics Sports Conference, and this is the only event that has fewer girls at it than mine event. Generationally, I don't know if should be a big focus. I think when you're building a sport, I think forcing things like trying to build in new fans isn't really helpful. So to me, the reason why this is going to be such a big sport is everyone young. I have a 10-year-old son, is on video games, and it's a big part of their life, and that's going to grow over time. And obviously, I'm in the generation that played video games early on, from when I was 5 years old up.
Well, part of that's the technology, too. Sometimes it's difficult for my generation to explain to my parents exactly what this is, and they've grown up with television. They're used to that technology to be acclimated to sports. So I say, no, it's on the internet. It's broadcasted on the internet. They're like, oh, not as familiar with that yet. But it's true, as my generation gets older and start having children, we can explain to our kids, everything about esports and the wonderful world of gaming. Well,
that's how sports grow. I mean, this sport takes an extraordinary amount of strategy, skill, and over time people are going to understand that.
Yeah. Well, speaking about technology here, how has technology shaped basketball or changed basketball in the last 50 years?
Well, it's changed it hugely. I think recently the exciting things that we're working on is we get 30 frames a second, real-time positioning of the ball and the players on the floor, and allows you to do things like how fast are players accelerating, how good how close is their defense on players, how much do they impact the ball. So it's that XY data we call it is really transforming the sport like it has transformed soccer. And obviously it's something you guys have the luxury of having. You have full-time fidelity of positioning of all the players and units and things like that. So we're adding that to basketball, and it's creating a revolution of how we analyze it.
It's fantastic to see that. And even with the Olympics and having this sort of instant information via the internet instead of having to wait for prime time to find out what's going on is really changing the face of sports internationally.
You don't have to worry about putting it on prime time because everyone's up at 3 a.m. So no matter when an esports event is happening, there are going to be people watching it, I think.
Exactly, exactly. Well, my last question for you is at MIT's annual Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. This year you said, esports will someday be the biggest sport in the world. What do you see in esports today that compels you to make such a claim?
Well, it's pretty basic. You look at the timeshare of young people in the world, and you see that their time spent in front of screens is growing, and then their time spent playing video games is growing. So it's only natural that folks like Idra and the stars, that are going to be in the future like him are going to continue to grow over time. And it's a compelling story. It's more interactive. I think you compare it to baseball. I don't think there's a competition. What a 10-year-old is going to do? Is he going to want to play Starcraft, or is he going to want to go to a baseball game? I don't think it's close. So you map that forward, and at some future point, this is going to be the biggest sport in the world.
Well, the infrastructure is definitely being built today, and we have an amazing tournament here. A lot of people are coming out to see it. Production wants to know, when will you start Jeremy Lin?
Production can ask questions at MLG. This is good. Jeremy Lin, yeah, for sure going to start for us. Obviously a big pickup for us. A guy's been overlooked, from passed over by 400 college coaches, passed over. He's really the underdog story of pretty much all sports, and we're excited to have him. Obviously, we had him for a couple weeks. I don't know if people know the whole story, and ended up waiving him, made that mistake, but we're able to get him back. And on the Houston Rockets next year, we're very excited. I don't know if he's a gamer. Yao Ming was a huge gamer, by the way. World of Warcraft, played all the time. So I'm getting to learn and know more about Jeremy, but my guess is he's pretty skilled at everything.
Well, tell him to come out. We'd love to have him.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, we're so excited to see careers of sports figures continue to grow, and also to see the sports figures we have here in esports continue to grow. And you as a general manager, you get to oversee that. Is there anything, though, that you see in esports that it currently needs to overcome in order to become the biggest sport in the world?
Time. I mean, really, I really think, and the one danger for the sport, and I'm sure the folks like Sundance who are helping shape it know, is to try and have it not splinter. The history of these sports is once you get quickly to a central, you look at UFC, once it got to a central group that was the dominant group, however it gets there, that's when the sport usually takes off. And if you look at sports like boxing, those are the ones that have really struggled because of, no one really knows who to root for. If you look at the evolution of chess, for example, when it split into multiple bodies, like the interest in that plummeted. So I think that's maybe one of the dangers for the sport as an outside observer, is to make sure that, a central body creates, awards and championships that are recognized over and over and build that tradition over time.
Okay, follow-up question for you, and after this, we're going to have to say goodbye because we've got some amazing matches coming up. What do you say to people when they ask you about esports? How do you describe it?
I don't think I have to. Most of my age, I'm turning 40 soon. They all have kids, so their kids are all playing video games. So, you go back, 100 years, everyone was playing baseball. 100 years later, everyone's playing video games. So, I don't think it's hard to describe you. They just have to look usually at their children. And frankly, guys my age, quite a few of them also played video games. So I feel like this interview is faded because Clutch is obviously a big tradition at Houston Rockets. It's called the Clutch City team. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. So grateful to have you here and to have your interests and passion show for your role in basketball and it being transitioned to esports. There's so many traditional fans of traditional sports fans out there, and we're starting to see a lot of similarities between the leagues of basketball and baseball and football.
You guys need a civilization or a mule tournament or something like that where I can hang. I can't hang with the Starcraft players.
Oh, they're really good. It's a premier game. Well, my friend, it's been a pleasure to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, this interview was presented by BIC Flex 4 Razors, and we're going to have some amazing StarCraft 2 action coming up in just a second. Stay tuned.